This show is sponsored by Den 10 Insurance Services, helping businesses get the right insurance for all their insurance needs. Visit den10.io to get a quote. DENTEN.io. And remember, when you buy an insurance policy from Den 10, you're giving back on a global scale. Hello, all my entrepreneurs and business leaders, and welcome to the Michael Esposito Show, where I interview titans of industry in order to inform, educate, and inspire you to be great. Is the founder of and managing partner of Purple Fox Legal. She created a unique law firm focused on intellectual property law for creatives and entrepreneurs. Uniquely positioned to assist her clients, she is not only a lawyer, but has also earned an M.B.A. from Indiana University. Her knowledge and passion for both business and IP law is the winning combination that helps create customized legal solutions to support her clients' business values. She's worked at both state and federal levels with numerous judges, providing her with a wider perspective of the law and how it works. She has also gained valuable insight working at a renowned intellectual property management company that focuses on protecting deceased celebrities' brands. Recently, her alma mater, Indiana University, Robert H. McKinney School of Law, recently published an alumni spotlight recognizing her accomplishments. She's been interviewed where she speaks openly about the importance of intellectual property and for all business types. She's passionate about educating others about the law in hopes to inspire appreciation for the value and beauty of intellectual property while using legal principles to grow businesses. She also enjoys giving back through volunteering and was awarded the Norman Lifstein Award of Excellence for volunteering over 500 pro bono hours. In addition to quench her thirst for perceiving intellectual property, she sets time aside to watch documentaries every month and enjoys time with her cat, Rocky. Please welcome founder and managing partner of Purple Fox Legal, Alyssa Devine. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to be here.
So much fun to have you on here. It's so much to talk about. And as we were just talking about in our pre-show about AI and where that's going, and that is certainly a fun topic to touch on is AI. The other thing that I thought was pretty interesting about your resume there is working on deceased celebrities and making sure that all of that stays intact, all of their information, and it's not moved around and changed and all the other stuff. And for our audio listeners, Alyssa's nodding along here with me in that, this is very important. I could read that off of your face. I know that we're going to get into all of that, and I know our listeners can't wait to hear about all of that. But first of all, you formed this amazing company on your own back during the pandemic. And something that I thought was really interesting about you in our pre-conversations was that you never even wanted to be an entrepreneur. So I'd love if you could just take us back a little bit about your start with all of this.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, I definitely did not want to be an entrepreneur. It was sort of the last choice for me, not in my grand overall plan for myself, but I was sort of forced into it due to the pandemic. And really, my introduction to entrepreneurship actually came through my grandfather as a child. He's a farmer in Indiana, so growing corn and beans and all that great stuff. But what I recognized was that, his success varied season to season, and it was dependent on a lot of different factors, such as the weather, and the effectiveness of pesticides and things like that. But what was scary to me, or at least, as I sort of reflect back, is that there were so many things outside of his control. And that's a very risky type of business, mostly, again, due to the weather. He couldn't control the weather. If it rained too much, that wouldn't be the best crop yield. but he could take some mitigating steps, such as, spraying pesticides. So little critters and insects aren't literally eating his profits. So that was sort of my first introduction into entrepreneurship. And it was scary, risky. And I kind of wanted to avoid that. And is part of the reason why I went to law school as well, to learn how to avoid risk or mitigate risk, I should say. And I kept coming back to intellectual property, and that just became my passion. That's what I wanted to practice. I didn't care, where exactly I practiced necessarily, but that's what I wanted to do. That's the subject matter that I wanted to focus on. And then the pandemic happened, and then all the job offers dried up, and a lot of attorneys actually were laid off of, small, medium, large firms. There was no distinction really. So I had to kind of be creative, and I kind of had the choice to take some other opportunities I know I wouldn't have enjoyed, or kind of jump off this cliff and take the plunge into entrepreneurship, which often conflicts with my attorney training, I'll say. But it's been a blessing in disguise, and I've done fairly well for being such a new company. And I think also the fact that my business is newer, it helps provide a little bit more credibility or even rapport with clients when they're also starting their businesses, because like I'm growing my business with them. So it's much more of a partnership collaboration versus attorney client.
Yeah. You said something that was interesting to me about that there was some opportunities that you could have taken. So it's funny because you say that you didn't ever want to be an entrepreneur, but there were opportunities for you to take job roles, but you knew you wouldn't have been happy. Could you speak a little bit more about that? Because we know so many of us have gone that route.
Yeah, so the majority of opportunities available to me during the pandemic were focused in criminal law and personal injury law. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I actually have a little bit of experience in both of those areas, but that's not what I enjoy doing. And I didn't want to limit myself to something I knew I wasn't passionate about. And the pandemic was hard enough for everybody. I wanted to do what I enjoyed, what I was passionate about. And I wanted to do intellectual property. So, at that time, the only option, or I guess the only option I could think of at that time was, well, I'm just going to create my own brand. I'll show people how to do it, and then I'll teach them how to, also use the law in addition. So I was very intentional about creating a brand, not a law firm.
What reason for my question there is, and I'll expand on it a little bit further about finding like your purpose. Like you're saying this right now about like it was important for you to follow your purpose, your heart, your desires, and to be happy and to find happiness and fulfillment in your work. And when I speak with young entrepreneurs or new entrepreneurs, it's important for them to kind of find their purpose, I think, right? And so I'm interested in how you were able to discover that for yourself of what your purpose was. And why I use the jobs as kind of like the framing for this is because it's easy when we're in a position where, we don't have a cash flow coming in. And we want that security, like you said, you didn't want to take a risk. We want the security of a job. And so it is easy to kind of put our purpose, our values aside to just take a job in order to get the need of finances going, get the cash flow going. But when you know your purpose and you know your value and you understand your why and you're attached to that, then you kind of lean to that and gravitate towards that, and therefore you put the blinders on and don't take those jobs. And so I'm interested for you what that process was like in terms of discovering your purpose and discovering your why. And I mean, leading to what you just said there of wanting to develop not a law firm, but a brand.
I think my kind of discovering my passion for intellectual property really began when I entered law school. And I had sort of in my mind the idea of working in federal government. That's sort of where I saw myself. And I attended a lot of different events. There were always different learning opportunities, like lunch and learn types of things, or guest speakers, things like that. I attended a lot of them, and I kind of explored the different areas of law. Um, and it was actually kind of like going to a restaurant. So you go to a restaurant, you get the menu, right? And you're contemplating all the different options. Oh, well, I might get that. I might get that. But then you go back to the same thing you always get. That's kind of like how it was for me with intellectual property. I just kept coming back to that, kept coming back to that. Oh, this is really interesting. Like, I really like this. So I attended more of those events, and learned the importance of understanding business principles, and how business is intrinsically intertwined with intellectual property. Really, you need both to provide, the best value for clients, and also just to educate yourself about how to do things better. As attorneys, it's difficult sometimes to apply somewhat archaic laws to things like AI and other, emerging technologies or innovative things that people are doing, because there's not a whole lot of interpretation behind those sorts of things. Yeah, I think there are approximately 15 AI intellectual property cases in the United States right now. So we're kind of, as a industry, kind of waiting to see what those decisions will be like, and almost hoping that they don't settle, so that we have a little bit of guidance and can better mitigate risk for our clients. But going back to the law school, so I realized the importance of understanding business principles, and I didn't really have a lot of business experience or business knowledge at that time, and so I decided to pursue an MBA degree while going to law school. And that's becoming a more popular type of program in a lot of places, because they understand the value of that. It was certainly difficult, but I think I perfected my time management skills by doing all that. And it was certainly difficult. I had to make a lot of personal sacrifices. And because it was a combined program, it took 4 years. Law school typically takes 3, but with both of those degrees, it took a total of 4. But by going through all of that and making all the sacrifices that I did, I just felt like at that time I had sacrificed enough, and it was, kind of time to seize what I wanted. And that's also part of the initiative that kind of drove me to starting Purple Fox Legal.
Something that you said there, I love the analogy of the restaurant, in that you have this menu and all of these different options, and yet you keep circling back to this thing that you're passionate about. I think it's such a great analogy in terms of finding your purpose in life, for anybody, of expanding your palette, is what I'm thinking here, of experiencing new things, going out and trying out every different, staying on the food analogy here. I know that you're a restaurateur, and you enjoy them as well. So you'll enjoy this of going out, try all the different restaurants, right? Mm-hmm. Go to the different restaurants, check out the menu. And I love your analogy here of that. If you keep going back to the restaurant that you really love, and you keep going back to that item on the menu that you really love, then that's probably where your passion lies, and probably where your why exists. I think that's just such a great way of maybe discovering it. And I think it goes along the lines of having more than one experience, trying a number of things, at least, just in terms of the exploring phase of discovering your why, is trying a number of things in order to see, what you like, what you dislike, what you're really good at maybe, and maybe what you're not so good at. And maybe that not so good is the challenge that you want in your life, and maybe it's not. But it's all about that. So I really love that analogy. Thank you for sharing that with us in terms of finding it. I definitely want to touch on AI and intellectual property and some of the cases that are out there. But before we do that, I still want to go into building Purple Fox and of course, this really cool, unique name there. How much do you attribute your M.B.A. program that you took to starting Purple Fox, to building out your own business?
I do not think I would have had the competence to start Purple Fox Legal had I not pursued an MBA program. Law school is very, very different from an MBA education. In some ways, they're polar opposites. For example, in law school, it's very individual focused and somewhat competitive, sometimes in an unhealthy way at some schools. Thankfully, my school was one of the better ones that didn't have that issue. But the MBA program was very, very collaborative. Everything was about, group projects and teamwork. Totally different. Totally different. And at least in that context. And it was a sort of just surprise, honestly. Oh my gosh, this is how, people do things. And what was also really unique about the MBA program, actually two things. One was that I was one of 5 women in a cohort of about 70, 80 people, which shocked me a lot. And I actually even asked the dean at that time, why am I the only, one of the only women? She said women don't apply. And I found that incredibly shocking. Like one of the top MBA programs in the country, and women don't apply. Why? Why don't they apply? Like I was just terribly shocked by that. But then also another unique thing was that the majority of my peers in the cohort were people who had 10 or more years of experience working in a full-time job. Well, I went straight through college to law school. So I never really had that. I, worked a number of part-time jobs, but never a full-time job. And I never focused singularly on that. So having their diverse perspectives, I think really helped me a lot in my personal growth. And I was challenged. I was challenged a lot. It wasn't really necessarily about, the homework, the assignments and stuff. It was in grades. That's not, of course you want to get good grades, but that's not really the focus. It's about learning and improving yourself. And I remember one of the biggest things that stuck with me in the MBA program is that they taught us to read peer review research articles and think about how to apply those conclusions in real life, which is really difficult, actually. And I've actually kind of done that a little bit or tried to do that. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But that's really what entrepreneurship is. And that's sort of at least my approach to it. And certainly everybody has their own approach. And I don't think, I don't think most people would do that if, they didn't have that background. But I think that's good that we have different ways of doing that and different ways of approaching that. And that's actually a number of peer review research articles have came to that same conclusion. The diverse perspectives, that's what gets you better results.
Yeah, I think about an MBA program in that, one, I feel like I've been going through my own MBA program. I don't have an MBA, but from starting a business and everything, and I do think about going back to school to get an MBA, and I wonder how my experience would change how I would learn. And so I do think that there is an advantage to those people in your cohorts who had some experience, some outside world experience and applied it. I also think that it was an advantage to you that you didn't have that outside world experience. And the reason being that you also didn't have the influence of what you may already know or think you know from the outside world. So I'm kind of like 50-50 on the whole thing, although I still would lean towards those who did have the full-time job having a bit of an advantage, and definitely give you some kudos on working through that. It's so interesting. I never knew how different, I was going to ask you about that, law school from business school would be. I would have thought both would be highly competitive. I would have thought business school was more competitive because, business and competition between businesses. And I don't know that we as outsiders see that within law of so competitive and how that is. What were some of the other differences that you mentioned? You said some complete polar opposites, and you had mentioned it earlier too about how sometimes business or being an entrepreneur completely contradicts your law mind. I'm interested in that as to what do you mean by that?
I think the best example of that actually is probably the Barbie movie. Barbie movie, was very heavily advertised. I couldn't get away from it. I haven't seen it. I probably will see it at one point, but I was overwhelmed and oversaturated with ads, as I'm sure everyone else was. But as I saw those ads, I also saw other things online, particularly social media, that I would characterize as infringement, intellectual property infringement. But from Mattel's perspective, owner of the Barbie trademark, the dolls and all that, that wasn't in their best interest to actually go after all those people. Like that would be the best legal decision. That's not the best business decision because that's going to deter people from going to see the movie, which made over $1.5 billion. So I think they made the right decision maybe there. But that also can be tricky from an intellectual property standpoint because you don't want to just, let everybody, use your marks all the time. You can lose your rights that way. But in this case, it was a strategic move for them. So that's what I mean by sometimes the business conflicts with the legal side of things. And, ultimately that's up to my client, what kind of route to go. But my role is more so the educator, the guide. I can tell them the potential consequences of, each option. It's just kind of up to them to make that decision.
Yeah, so you can see it from the legal standpoint and help make that case for that, but you also see it from the marketing and brand standpoint. To your point about the Barbie movie, we took the girls to the Spirit of Halloween shop. These are the pop-up Halloween places with Halloween coming around the corner and getting them their Halloween costumes. And my daughters were asking, Denise and Tenley were asking us, so what are you going to be for Halloween? And I was like, I'm not going to be anything. I'm bringing you trick-or-treating. And no, we want you to dress up. We want you to dress up. So there was actually a Ken t-shirt, a black Ken t-shirt that says Ken on the front of it. And I was just like, how about I be Ken for Halloween? And she goes, yeah. So I was like, all right, cool. So we bought the Ken t-shirt, and my wife, I was like, all right, she'll be Barbie. So she's going to wear a white shirt and pink, and we got her pink spandex to complete the Barbie outfit. So we're just going to be like simple parents with this. But I guess what I'm saying here is that Ken t-shirt, when I think about it, it doesn't say Mattel anywhere on it. It was in the pop-up Halloween shop, and it's made in China. It's a large, and that's all that's on the label. And so to your point, it's the infringement, as you're saying, copyright infringement more than likely. But it's probably getting the Barbie movie brand out there because we're going to be dressed as Barbie and Ken for Halloween, and people are going to see it and ask about the movie, and it'll bring up the conversation because that's why people this year would be dressed that way. And of course, all of our listeners, you're listening to this after Halloween. We certainly acknowledge that, but you get the point in terms of all of that. I'm going to move on now to what you just said of putting that marketing hat, that branding hat on, and I'm interested in Purple Fox. I know you love your cat Rocky, and you enjoy cuddling up and reading a book and all that other stuff with your kitty cat, but it's not a fox. So what made you choose the color purple, and what made you choose a fox? Very interested in that.
It was so hard. And I'm sure a lot of other entrepreneurs find it very challenging to come up with the name. I think it took me about 3 months to come up with a name and 3 months to come up with a logo. So I was very careful and intentional about it. But I did a lot of research, kind of took my M.B.A. training and kind of took that approach and did a lot of reading and color psychology and other types of things. And basically I wanted something that was easy to pronounce, easy to spell, obviously protectable, had the available, domain name and the available social media handles and things like that. And I also kind of had in my mind, if I want to use an animal, have like a little kind of mascot, and I feel like they think that would be memorable. But traditionally, I think a lot of lawyers, I think that's kind of associated with like lions, which is fine. But, I wanted to be different, completely different. I wanted to stand out a lot. So I was like, okay, you know what? Like, let's do purple. So purple really invokes wisdom and creativity. It also is associated with royalty, of course, but we can maybe say I have royal customer service or something like that, but mainly it's for wisdom and creativity because I help entrepreneurs and creatives. So I was like, okay, that makes sense. And then Fox for kind of cleverness and also getting out of tricky situations, which is essentially what a lawyer does in a lot of cases. I mean, I prefer to prevent problems, but I can certainly help people get out of a sticky situation if they find themselves in that. And then, of course, legal. Because I was like, I got to tell them kind of what we're talking about here. What industry are we in? But it's worked really well. And I go to networking events and stuff in Nashville and Tennessee, and it's so funny because people, I almost every time somebody will come up to me and say, "You're Purple Fox," and I say, "Yes, that is my name." Uh, and it's just so funny because it's so memorable. They don't remember my name, and I'm not offended at all. But they remember my brand, which is the whole point.
Yeah. And when you think about branding, is it also because of expansion?
To a degree, yes, yes. So I was very intentional about picking a very strong trademark. And I mean, there's a lot of things out there. I think I had a little bit of advantage compared to a lot of entrepreneurs because most attorneys and law firms just use the last names of the owners, and sometimes that's due to state ethics regulations, and then other states have a little bit more lax terms on that. Basically, as long as it's not like misleading. So again, I was I just wanted to create a brand. And I'm also an introvert, so I don't like being out in the spotlight, even though I'm, on your podcast talking about all these things. But it just, it takes a lot of energy, and I prefer the brand to be sort of just more out there versus me as an individual.
Yeah, I asked that expansion question because that's when I developed my brand. It was for that reason. Is the same thing of I didn't want it to be focused on me, like you just said. I wanted to be focused on that. So my insurance company, and most people are very familiar with insurance companies. They're typically like law firms, the last name or the first and last name of the owner. So it's like Michael Esposito Insurance. And my original concept that I had before I had this bigger idea was Esposito Group. But that's why I asked you that question about expansion is when I thought about it in terms of a legacy, I was thinking I want to have something that is not attached to me that people can make their own. In all fairness, I did name it after my daughters. and that was a whole other, like you said, branding exercise to build Den 10 and everything. But I did choose the color purple, and I thought that was interesting that you said wisdom and creativity because that's what I wanted to attract to was a younger, creative audience. So it's really interesting that you bring that up. I love that you also went through like color psychology to find your brand. I think that's really cool. And I like all of the background and meaning behind it all. I think really, really neat. And it does help in terms of like networking events where, people know you for your brand. And it just really, in an industry like yours and like mine, where everybody goes by their last names, it really makes us stand out. So I think it was really, really clever, as you said. All right. As promised, I want to get to this AI and intellectual property cases because I'm sure that this is a lot of fun for you to talk about and interesting for us to learn about because this is something that's happening. I was just I like to go on YouTube and watch different clips between basketball and sports cars, and that's usually what I get. And then I get some stand-up comics pop in there every once in a while, and some Joe Rogan pops in there every once in a while. And recently, a lot of Joe Rogan's clips have been dubbed with AI. And so this is very interesting, like what's happening in that space of where they're actually what people are doing is they're using AI to take because he has so much content out there, and I guess one day this will happen to me in my show. He has so much content out there that they're taking clips from like different episodes and different shows and things that he said and like mashing it all together, and then they're doing the same for his guests, to where this one clip that I watched, I had to read the comments to be like, is this real or not? Where he had one guest arguing with not he did, but what AI created was one guest arguing with another guest, and you realize that it's two different shows, but they just pieced it all together so perfectly, and with Joe in there and everything so perfectly, that you would have thought that actually happened. So I am really interested as to how the law is starting to work on this, and maybe I don't know, cut back on that, because I mean that would, if you're not looking into the comments to learn that this might be AI, you're thinking this is actually happening on his show. So I'm really interested as to what's happening in the legal's perspective of all of this.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think it was just last week or maybe the week before, Tom Hanks, came out and, said, hey, you've seen this dental ad with me. It wasn't actually me. It was AI. Right. So it's just, it's happening a lot. And, I'm forward thinking. I'm supportive of, innovation, and things like that. But when it comes to using AI for content generation, there are a lot of intellectual property issues, such as, what you were describing. If we're mostly, I think the probably the biggest problem is actually right of publicity. So the right of publicity is a state-based intellectual property right, and it grants a person the ability to control any commercial use of their any unequivocal identifying feature. So it can be name, image, likeness, but it can also be voice, signature, and other types of things as well. Anything that just unequivocally identifies that person. And the reason why that's a big problem, I think, when it comes to AI is really because of how the right of publicity is, I guess, organized. Because it's state-based, there's kind of a slightly different scope or slightly different definitions in each state, and what you can and cannot enforce, and what the different exceptions are. So it gets very, very complicated. And I think part of the solution to these AI challenges is a federal right of publicity. I'm not sure if we're going to see that. I believe that there's actually the first federal right of publicity statute was actually introduced in 1888, but and I'm sure there's been numerous ones since. But there's also one now that I believe is called No Fakes. But by using AI, taking other people's content and then generating an image or a video of them saying whatever, right? That's right of publicity. That could be defamation. It could be copyright infringement. There's just so many things with that. Potentially trademark infringement as well. But how do we control this? How do we monitor this? Is kind of the question I think that we're kind of looking at right now. So a lot of different authors have sued OpenAI basically because this AI has taken all these different literary authors' work and used it to basically learn from and generate content or different inputs that people have given the technology, and it's very disturbing, at least to an intellectual property attorney, but it's also problematic because there's not a whole lot of guidance on how to, establish and how to, I guess, provide proof of infringement in these kind of cases, because the technology is very new, and the legal industry, it has yet to catch up with this century in a lot of different ways, but it's just challenging on a number of different levels to prove these things and to monitor. If you're a photographer, you can do like a Google reverse image search for a lot of your content and figure out if somebody's using it without permission pretty easily. there are a couple of different things for like music copyrights as well. But when it comes to AI, like how do you monitor that? There's really not a clear answer yet. And that's kind of part of the challenge really with the legal industry and the, kind of major tech industry.
So,
But I've seen one solution that I've seen is that a lot of different websites are are writing different AI policies. And I've actually done that as well. So like, if it's basically against my website's terms and policies to use AI for any of the content on there, basically. Because I don't want any of my stuff to be used without permission. I don't want it to be taken out of context, and um, I don't want my license to be at risk for inaccurate legal advice of any kind. So just kind of thinking about those different challenges. We're in it. It's an exciting time, but it's also kind of a scary time.
So what you're saying there in terms of the website piece, is that meaning, so you're saying that you have it on there where AI can't scrape your website for information? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that would be against the terms and conditions. Yes.
How do you know if they're scraping it or not scraping it?
There's not really a good way of knowing.
No
to be
good
honest.
way of knowing right now. I guess you're basing it off of the assumption that some kind of ethical AI company sees this and says, "Oh, okay, we can't use that one," right? That's kind of what it's
kind of safeguarding myself for the future,
right?
In a way. So if I find out later that it did happen, then I can go back and point to that policy.
Okay. Yeah, so it's good to have in place, but nothing that you can do to reinforce that right quite yet. I want to just kind of go back to a question I have that you were sharing earlier in terms of authors and literary work. So is it my understanding then from what I got from you that what AI is doing is essentially, let's say, reading that work and then taking information that is factual or not factual, whatever it is, but knowledge base information from that, and then rewording it and redistributing it, but without giving credit to the work. Is that the issue that you're describing there?
That's part of it. I think it's getting a little bit more in depth though. It's not just, the different facts and information. It's the tone, it's how the words are put together, like what basically writing styles.
Taking that from the author.
Correct. To basically generate content that is, I guess, more human-like.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah. So I don't know if it's the case studies or just more of maybe conversational with you in terms of this. But I mean, wouldn't it, to me, what makes sense would be that, let's say, YouTube or Facebook or Google, like the big players that have this AI, that people are finding the AI sources on, would put some sort of parameters around AI. And maybe, for me, like I said, my experience is on YouTube, and I go through YouTube Shorts, and that's where I saw this Joe Rogan clip. And I would think that, that's owned by Google, that if Google put some parameters where that can't be put on there, that they would pull that off, right? So is that what's happening or trying to happen? Is there any conversations around that?
I think that's still kind of a question in the air, but I have recently reviewed Meta's policies, and those policies basically, when you do upload content, you're basically giving them a license to do whatever you want with it. And actually, there's a specific section in Meta's policies where you're granting them a license to use your right of publicity, to monetize your right of publicity, actually, which is honestly frightening a little bit, but also, at least in terms of how I see it, unethical. And there was actually another case filed, I think, in February, with, I think, Kylan Young sued Neocortex with the basically a mobile app. I think it was Reface, I think is what it was called. Basically utilizing his name and his image and likeness, and also a lot of other sort of influencers and micro influencers write a publicity, essentially, again, for commercial purposes without permission. So that case is going on right now. It's actually a class action.
So what happened in that case?
So essentially, Neocortex developed this mobile app. I believe it's called Freeface. I could be wrong on that, but essentially they used AI and other sorts of things to recreate his image and likeness in some kind of commercial context. It kind of varies, I think, from the different people.
And they made a commercial using it, is what you're saying?
Essentially, yeah.
Oh, and because he's an influencer, that's and as an influencer, he gets paid for that. That's how he earns his living, is to use his face, his image and likeness. And so they used it and were able to commercialize it. And so that's an ongoing case. And is that
he was a contestant on I think Big Brother is what it was. But yeah, he's since reality TV, he's become an influencer. And again, yes, that is how those people are paid. What value does their right of publicity or trademarks or other, components of their brand, what value does that have if anybody and everybody can just use it without permission and without paying them?
Yeah.
It has none, which defeats the whole purpose of intellectual property rights.
Right. And I know you work with some creatives in all sorts of genres, whether music or influencers and things of that nature. Are you experiencing a lot of this right now with your clients?
There are a lot of questions being asked, and kind of like I said before, it's really difficult to even find out if this is actually happening. The technology and methods aren't quite there yet, because at this point, most AI technologies are just kind of scraping anything and everything off of the internet or other sources and using that to basically, become more advanced and to produce better content or to just work better, and however it was, whatever the function of that AI was.
What were some of the case studies that you were mentioning before that you said are out there that you're looking to see what happens with them?
So the Kylan Young was one, and then the Open AI was the other. Those are kind of the two bigger ones. I think there are a couple of other ones as well, but those are the two big ones that I'm watching very closely and kind of waiting to see what happens. I think that actually with the Kylan Young one, the judge recently dismissed the defendant's motion to dismiss or denied their motion to dismiss based on the Neocortex, the defendant, basically said, oh, well, we couldn't have violated their publicity rights because that's preempted by the Copyright Act, which is not true. Just basically they're saying the Copyright Act, the federal statute Copyright Act, is the same as right of publicity. And it's most certainly not. And copyright protects creative works fixed in a tangible medium. There's no fixation requirement for right of publicity, and there's no creative work with right of publicity either. So to say that, I'm kind of confused why some people think that. That's a common misconception about right of publicity. But the judge, immediately kind of turned that way. Like, no, this is moving on. It's not preempted. So, and the same is true for trademark law as well. That also is a common argument. But again, it's a distinctive type of intellectual property, and there's actually 5 different types. But people normally kind of associate intellectual property with patents, but there are patents, trademarks, copyrights, publicity rights, and trade secrets. In the United States, at least. There are other types of intellectual property other places, but I won't get into that today.
Something that I noticed that actually happened to me recently was fake Instagram accounts, fake social media accounts. For me, it happened on Instagram, where someone pretty much, I guess, screenshotted I don't know how it's done, but they screenshotted my Instagram or whatever, and then they started going through the people that follow me and followers and DMing them and messaging them. And then we requested to have it removed, and it was removed. How does that fall in what you do?
So that would probably fall under the DMCA, like takedown, Digital Millennium Copyright Act takedown process. And um, well, technically it only applies to copyrights, but in practice it applies to really all intellectual property. At least that's how the majority of like social media and other types of user generated content platforms work. So, I actually recently had somebody come to me about something like that, and they're like, is this like what do we do? What do we
Mm.
do? And then kind of advising them through that process. And I I think the DMCA procedure is abused quite a bit. In order to really technically, you're supposed to conduct like a good faith analysis whether something's fair use, um, and a lot of people don't think about that. They just kind of like want to take down everything. And we have recent guidance from the Supreme Court about copyright infringement, in particular the fair use defense, which is very misunderstood. A lot of people think that just because you don't make money, that means you didn't infringe, or you're a nonprofit, so you didn't infringe. Well, that's not true. There's actually a school in Texas that um, was penalized for copying a lot of like study aids and things like that without permission, without getting the appropriate license. And the owners of that content were actually awarded like I think a $11 million damages award. I mean, it was quite a substantial amount of money. It was like a three employee company. It was crazy, but I mean, when you infringe a copyright, there are significant consequences,
Mm.
and um, the statutory damages are anywhere from 750 to 30,000 per act of infringement. So think about that's all the times they studied, or I'm sorry, copied those study aids, right, without permission. So you have to like count all that up, and that's the number they came to, the jury. So I
Wow.
mean, it's
So,
it's
so what about my PowerPoints that I take images and use on? Is, is, is that an issue?
well, I haven't seen your PowerPoint,
I'm,
so I
I'm,
can't comment.
I,
But
I'm
I
joking about my PowerPoints. We only use the ones that are allowed from Canva.
that's
So, they gave us the copyright.
that's okay. But yeah, one of part of the fair use defense is commenting and criticizing. So if you're presenting an educational workshop, and you're using photos and stuff, that's for the most part probably okay. But if you're showing an entire movie without any really context, like there's that's just kind of blatant infringement. Actually, another school got in trouble for showing The Lion King when the newer version came out. Disney sent them a cease and desist letter, but and then going back to the business versus
Yeah.
legal decision, they quickly pulled back from that aggressive stance whenever people started to criticize Disney for that act. But I mean, really, how the story was told in the news, it kind of was copyright infringement. So Disney had a right to pursue that, but it certainly made them look bad when they did that.
Hmm.
So
But I mean, we all
hurt their
watched
reputation.
movies in school, so that it would be considered copyright infringement, but something that maybe they might want to back off of, is what you're saying?
Well, I think, well, in school, typically the kids will watch movies and you don't have to write an essay or answer questions or something like that. So there is like an educational component. In the particular case or situation that I was talking about, this was sort of like an after school type of thing where wasn't any educational purpose other really than the fact that it was happening in a school.
Right.
So that was pretty much the only tie to any kind of education.
Wow. Yeah. No, I mean, I remember I was part of an after school program and they would play movies. I remember we watched The Fox and the Hound in one of those. So that was a Disney movie and we watched, and it was just it sounds like what you're talking about, which is just to entertain us, where we would, put the movie on while we're waiting for our parents to pick us up. And that would be considered copyright infringement, I guess.
In a lot of contexts, it very likely would. And
Wow.
what's ironic
It's
is
crazy.
that, every time you go to see a movie, one of the first things that you see is the copyright notice and how, copyright infringement is,
Right.
well, it can be, obviously a civil, but, violation, but it can actually be a criminal act as well.
Wow.
And just last month, actually, somebody uh, basically uploaded a bunch of content, I think mostly music, to YouTube's content ID system, if you're familiar with that, basically claiming to be the owner of a bunch of different songs. And then what was getting the revenue from all of that, right? At like millions and millions of dollars. And it was kind of, I think it was like a team of people, but they were sentenced to like 5 years in prison.
Mm.
So I mean,
Yeah.
it can be a crime as well,
Well,
when you get to that level.
Yeah, doing it with, I think for what it sounds like with what you're talking about, it's kind of like the intention behind it is like the after school program. The intention is just to kind of entertain these kids while they're waiting for their parents. They're not trying to make millions off of playing the Fox and the Hound, right? Versus to what you're talking about, sounds like there was a intention behind making money off of uploading these, and it was done. Sounds like one of those kind of hacker groups is what it sounds like. It kind of brings up to me some thoughts of that. Sometimes you'll Google a song, and of course YouTube will be the first thing to pop up because you are in Google, and the videos will come up, and it's not always the artist's video. It's sometimes put on by somebody else. So how is that taken care of then? Because if, let's say, Taylor Swift, you're Googling or trying to listen to her song, and she's not the first one to pop up, and it's somebody else, but it's her song. Is that the same thing? Like what's going on there? Because those don't get pulled.
It can be in some contexts, and yeah, I think part of it's whether those sorts of things are monetized. And
Well, the channel is monetized, right?
If it is monetized, then the way Content ID works is that, it takes at least a portion of that revenue and then gives it to really the publisher, because the publisher is the one that's enforcing these types of things online and submitting the DMCA's and stuff. And sometimes it's like a game of whack-a-mole. You just can't get them all. At least not, in a long-term or permanent context. And at a certain point, a lot of businesses have to kind of ask themselves if, whether it's really worth doing that all the time. And, sometimes it is, sometimes it's not.
Right.
Kind of depends on the business. But I mean, think about, how else would you spend that money? You could reinvest that in your business. So there's just kind of a twofold there. The intention, whether to make money, but also how does that business want to utilize its resources?
Yeah. I remember a story. Go ahead.
I was going to say there's actually a really clever use of AI. It's called this program called Synthesa. I don't know if you've heard of it. Basically, they film people, and you can actually create a custom like avatar as well, but doing like a 15-minute speech or something like that. And basically it'll be like a text to video type of situation. So it's like, if you wanted to get a custom avatar, you have to just, do their instructions and do that like 15-minute recording, and, all the certain angles and stuff. And then, once they kind of put that in their program and, do their technical thing, then you can just, basically upload a script, and then it will take that script and it will make your avatar say those things.
Yeah,
it's like you're almost basically a clone almost of yourself in a way. But the difference between that and a lot of the other things that we've been talking about is that with this particular company, they're getting permission from the people. They're very, very transparent about that. And, of course, in order to get a custom, avatar, you have to give them permission as well.
Yeah.
But it's a very creative use of AI. And that's the sort of thing that I think is very promising.
Yeah.
It's not all bad. It's not all bad.
Yeah, I don't think it's all bad either. I think that, with what you're saying there's so much really good stuff out there to make content marketing so much easier for business owners. Like, you talk about the business owner, the entrepreneur side, is so many business owners and entrepreneurs, they're really about their craft, right? You're about the legal side. And the marketing side is challenging to do, whether it's from creating content where you're sharing a message online, or doing a voiceover, or doing a commercial, or doing some kind of something where you're being put in front of a camera is hard. Not just hard because it's vulnerable, but also hard because of time. It's time consuming. Yeah, you're right, 100%. A lot of this technology certainly helps a lot. I wanted to say real quick, I can't remember the product. I wish I could off the top of my head, but I do remember that there was a show that I listened to, a podcast, How I Built This. And one of the interviewees, his product actually did really well because of the copyright infringement that was happening. It kind of got out there. It was being made in China and the bootleg versions, and that's what made it popular, and where his brand was able to grow. And I can't remember who it was, but I'll have to kind of like come back to this one day. But I think that sometimes it can kind of help to some extent, and maybe that, like you said, that's why maybe the brand will back off a little bit, because they're like, hey, you know what? This is kind of like getting our name out there. So what's the harm there? Speaking about getting your name out there, I think that there are some really great ways to get your name out there, and volunteering and giving our service is a really, really great way. And I know that that's not the intention behind you doing pro bono work, but I am interested in the amount of pro bono work that you did and what your intentionality behind it was, or is, because you still do it.
Yeah, certainly not as much as I did during law school. So doing pro bono work, part of it was, I want experience, like, I wanted to get out of the classroom. Like, what is this? What it really is the practice of law? We read all these, 100-year-old cases, but what does that mean today? Right. So it's kind of, that was part of it. And then, after kind of shadowing a couple of attorneys, doing that for first couple of times, I just, saw gratitude, a lot of gratitude, because people they just didn't know. And they don't know because it's not taught in schools. It's not even taught in law school, actually. Well, intellectual property isn't a required class in law school. So unless you take that, specific elective, you won't know that information either. So, being able to use your specialized knowledge to kind of give back. I think that's really the duty of really everybody to some degree. Either your knowledge or your talents to give back, at least kind of just as you're able. So, in law school I was able to, do over 500 hours. That was a lot. And some of that was working for judges. Governments don't have the best budget, and but I didn't care whether I was paid. I wanted to work with that judge, and I wanted to learn from that judge. So learning about experience, how to actually practice law, getting out of the classroom, and also just kind of seeing the benefit of that work. And actually, I think that's what really makes at least intellectual property law really unique compared to a lot of other practice areas. I get to see my work outside of work. So whenever, my clients and the businesses and stuff, they're growing, they're, having the different events, and just it's rewarding. It's rewarding, which kind of, further incites my passion. And also just, I think makes me a lot more relatable to my clients, because I'm growing with them.
Yeah, you said that earlier, that you're growing with your clients, and I thought that was really, I think that that's really nice, because you can go through a lot of the experiences together, and they're not doing it alone. I think that's really, really cool. Something I like to learn from my guest is about a mantra or a statement that you live by, and I'm interested in yours as to any type of mantra or statement that you live by, and if any, what the meaning is for you.
I don't know about a specific mantra, but one thing that's always stuck with me for as really long as I can remember is my intention to learn. I want to
Mm.
learn everything. Um, I don't care whether it's useful or not. I just want to know. If I could know everything and I had that choice, I would choose that. Um, all the, big questions in the universe, I'd love to know. Is that really helpful for me, in a practical everyday scenario? Not really, but that's part of who I am, lifelong student. And I think to a pretty big, degree, I think most entrepreneurs need to be in order
Mm.
to, could have their businesses continue growing, being successful. And well, especially with the pandemic, a lot of businesses had to pivot, and unfortunately, a lot of them couldn't for whatever reason, so they closed.
Yeah,
But
I think that that's a really great quality to have, to be a lifelong learner. It's the quality of leaders to always be learning, to always be wanting to learn and more and acquire more knowledge, and especially apply the knowledge. And I think that there's always a context to apply knowledge. It's funny. It's like, so, I always ask these questions to myself of, what am I getting out of this? Like, but you get so much, like, I mean, it's just really like, where do you get to use it is really what it comes down to, right? And the examples and everything. So I love that mantra for you. I want to get a little personal with you and have a little fun with you. I know that you enjoy visiting different restaurants and have a big passion for that, and traveling and checking out new places. Tell us some stories in terms of that. Like, what is your favorite restaurant? Where is it? How did you find it?
I think one of my favorite restaurants in Nashville is the Grilled Cheesery. I was like, that's a kind of interesting name. Like, let's check this out. It's kind of like Vanderbilt. And I think I was just kind of driving along and just happened to see it actually because I was, new to the city and everything. But um, I could like kind of like intellectual property in the restaurant thing. I keep going back there. I just like it. I think it used to be a food truck, and then they've since expanded into a couple of different branches. But it's just kind of, I don't know, unique name, and just kind of a 50s diner feel, but with kind of more modern industrial look,
Mm.
I guess I would say. But I just kind of like that environment. But there are a lot of other great restaurants in Nashville too. I mean, almost every day it seems like something new is popping up, and I have an ever long list of things that people have told me. Oh, you need to go to this. You need to go to this. So, um, that's I think definitely one of the perks of being in Nashville, just all the great stuff that's happening there,
Yeah.
especially with restaurants and stuff like that. And um, there's yeah, always something to do for sure.
That's cool. That's cool. And my last question for you is, where do you see the future of Purple Fox?
That's a hard question. When I think about the future for myself, for my company, I don't see a linear path. I see sort of like a web of possibilities, and
Mm.
what's kind of more likely versus what kind of more the direction I want to go in. I think that I don't want Purple Fox to become anything corporate like. I think I want it to remain, maybe small to medium firm. Uh, and I'm actually licensed in New York as well. So potentially a physical expansion into New York, but employees and stuff like that, and um, just kind of also just I would like to remain within the small business and entrepreneurship community. I think they're left behind a lot in a lot of different ways. So actually, especially female entrepreneurs. in terms of like, venture capital and things like that. They're just statistically less likely to get those sorts of things. And there's kind of a gap between, what they need versus what sort of the majority of the legal industry provides. And I think Purple Fox helps bridge that gap to a degree. And, I want to help people continue doing amazing things.
I love that. That's beautiful. What's the best way for people to find you, whether it's on social media or on the internet?
So people can find me on our website, purplefoxlegal.com. And actually, we have a number of resources, blog articles, and ebooks that I think will be very informative for your audience. There's one that's really popular called The Legal Risk of Social Media. So definitely check that out. And also, on social media, all the things, Facebook, Instagram, at Purple Fox, you'll find us.
That's awesome. Yeah. So The Legal Risk of Social Media, download that ebook. It's at Purple Fox Legal. It's been awesome having you on the show today. I love your logo. I love your branding. I went on your website. It's a lot of fun. Get to learn a little bit about you and what you do. Really, really cool. It's been awesome having you on today.
Thank you for inviting me. Really great. I think we had a really great conversation. Your audience take away a lot of knowledge nuggets from today.
Thank you for listening to The Michael Esposito Show. For show notes, video clips, and more episodes, go to michaelespositoinc.com/podcast. Thank you again to our sponsor, Den 10 Insurance Services, helping businesses get the right insurance for all their insurance needs. Visit den10.io to get a quote. That's DENTEN.io. And remember, when you buy an insurance policy from Den10, you're giving back on a global scale. This episode was produced by Uncle Mike at the iHeart Studios in Poughkeepsie. Special thanks to Lara Rodrian for the opportunity and my team at Michael Esposito Inc. My guest today